Okay, we're unmuted. We're
Can
good.
you see us?
Can you guys see us?
Yes.
Hello, Jared. Where are you right now?
I am in Kansas City, actually. I had a last minute trip down here, so I'm sorry I can't be there in person.
Yeah, rude. So rude. You are fine.
No Chiefs game?
Haters gonna hate.
You didn't go to the Chiefs game?
I did not. I'm at a conference, and fortunately we didn't get Chiefs tickets in time, so
Good game.
it was a good game.
Yeah. Okay, well, we have a small but mighty group here, so we'll go around and do introductions for you, Jared. You can see us, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you see the whole room or just the center?
Yeah.
The right side I can't see, just but it's all right.
Okay, we'll start with Adrian.
Hi, everyone. I'm Adrian Gomez Ramos. I'm here with the chamber.
I'm Leslie Heinrichsen, and I'm mad at you, Jared.
Have you recorded? Say nice things.
Are we supposed to say our business? Or no? Yeah.
Last name, whatever you want.
Okay, I'm with Globe Life Family Heritage.
Carly Carter, I'm with Aloe Fiber. Amanda Palachek, Kearney Regional Medical Center.
Hey, Babel Kitchen and Bath.
Paul Downey, Bluestone Weapon Advisors. And I'm Ethan Canust, I'm just a UNK student.
Not just.
Not
Jared, have you ever heard of the next program at UNK?
I have not, no.
Okay, well, don't quote me on it, but it's kind of like a leadership program. Am I close, Ethan?
I don't really know.
He doesn't know.
Only
I don't really
it's for some businesses.
Yeah, it's fine. It's like a
We haven't had a-
leadership UNK.
We haven't had a meeting for it yet. So.
Yes, but we talked to the coordinator and said, hey, this would be really good for your people to attend, and more of them actually came, so claps for that. Okay, well, I feel like we'll just go ahead and get started then. I was gonna give you a little spiel about what Young Professionals Group, but I feel like you guys kind of know what's going on. But thank you for helping us kick off YP Week and presenting this topic, so take it away.
Yeah, perfect. Once again, I apologize for not being there in person, but this should be a good conversation. If you have questions throughout or feedback or thoughts throughout, by all means, share it. Don't be afraid to interrupt me. We are recording this for anybody who wants to get the recording after the fact. So, yeah, let's just go ahead and get started. High level agenda. Obviously, I'll do a quick introduction, a little bit about my background, my experience. Then I'm going to shift the conversation to, obviously we want to talk about how to do salary negotiation, benefits negotiation, etc. But I want to start the conversation with how does that look from a company's perspective? That's a really important part. Even if you're a manager, wherever you're at in your career, understand that there's two sides to a negotiation and think how the company is going to perceive it, and how to just approach that conversation. We'll then shift the conversation into how do we structure, how do we prepare, how do we have that conversation with our current employer? In my experience, my opinion, negotiating with a current employer is much more difficult than a potential employer. You have a relationship, you don't want to, you're afraid of upsetting them, right? So let's just spend a lot of time on how to prepare, how to have that conversation. We'll then shift the focus to, how do we prepare and handle conversations, negotiations with potential employers? Obviously, unemployment's really tight right now. A lot of people, get reached out to on LinkedIn. So how do you prepare yourself for a job hunt? How do you prepare yourself for a negotiation with with a potential employer? Some of the do's and don'ts there. And like I said, throughout, we'll have time at the end of Q&A. This will probably take 30 minutes. So if you have questions throughout, by all means, feel free to ask. So like I said, for those who don't know me, I've worked at Cabela's, I've been at the Buckle, been at 5 9s for almost a decade, and then recently moved to Calix as a sales engineer. And during that time, I've probably had 40 or 50 different direct reports to me. I've led both, engineering teams ranging from, beginning of their career to, very seasoned top level engineers. I've led sales teams, both internal, external sales teams. So, that's goal setting, commission structure, a pretty wide array. And all those are allowed me to have this conversation today on, the manager perspective. And that's, like I said, that's really important. And then, like I said, the last bullet point, I have served on an executive team, so I understand, how companies think from an executive level, right? Where, income, margins, those types of things matter, and why that will impact or potentially impact salary negotiations, because, like I said, there are two sides to every negotiation. So let's go ahead and just get started. The first thing I want to ask the group, if you had to guess a number, what percentage of people do you feel they're underpaid, right? If you just asked your peers, what do you think the number of people who admittedly just say, yes, I'm underpaid, or, my company's screwing me, et cetera. What do you think that percentage is?
90.
64.
Yeah.
It's a
80.
good guess. So it's roughly 60, it's 59-60%. So it's a pretty big number, right? I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but everyone on this call likely has felt that, right? Unless you've started your own business from the very beginning, you've likely felt that. So that's perfectly fine. That's why I'm glad we're having this conversation today. But that's, there are options there, especially with tight labor markets. There's a lot of opportunity out there. So we want to make sure everyone is engaged, everyone's happy with their compensation. And there's a lot of aspects to that. So we'll just talk through that. So, like I said, the first thing I really want to spend some time on is understanding the company's perspective. There's a lot of misconceptions, right? A lot of people feel that the company is out to get them, feel that they're being slighted by their manager, that their manager doesn't like them, so they're not paying them more. And by and large, it's just not accurate, right? The most important part about any employee-employer engagement and relationship is, at the end of the day, your employers want you to be happy and they want you to be engaged, right? And compensation is a very important part of happiness. I mean, I'll talk a little bit about it shortly, but everyone has items, whether that's work-life balance, whether it's compensation, that they're really, really want to focus in on and key in on. And, your employer, within their control, wants to adhere to that, right? Wants to make sure you're in a good spot. Especially, in post-COVID times where salary and hiring and recruitment is so difficult. Is anybody in the group responsible for hiring? And if you are, how many applicants are you getting for roles?
I mean, we just hired someone, we probably have like 10 or 11. This was
So
about a year ago.
the roles I've been involved with, 5.9s would average less than 5 applicants per role, and that's posting for months, sharing on LinkedIn, paying for advertisements on Facebook, etc. There just aren't a lot of applicants, right? People are afraid of making changes. The economy is slowing down. So at the end of the day, it's more cost effective to keep your current staff happy and engaged. Now, it's not easy, right? And everyone wants unique things, but that is what ultimately most companies want. The next real key here is very few employees or employers are intentionally underpaying their staff. It ties directly back to my last statement. If you're intentionally underpaying staff, your staff are going to leave, right? Walmart will pay you $18 to $20 an hour. When there's that type of wage pressure, the business can't afford to intentionally underpay people. Maybe they're out of touch with where salaries currently are. That's totally possible. But very, very, very few are saying, I can make more money if I just don't pay enough, because they're going to pay more in training, recruiting, loss of customer satisfaction. Just not worth it. So the next point from the company's perspective is, unless you work in a very small company where your boss is the owner or a very large shareholder with a lot of sway, management can't always do the right thing. One of the things I learned really early on as a manager, probably one of the hardest lessons I learned really early on is, your team looks up to you, and they've mustered up the courage to have a conversation about salary. You do your research, you agree, yeah, I feel this person should be paid more money. You go to your leadership, say, hey, I want to give, Bob a 10% raise, and they tell you no, right? Even though I want to do the right thing, the company's goals don't allow that to happen. And, if you work for a publicly traded company, you likely see this a lot. I remember this very distinctly at the Buckle when I was there, and even Cabela's when I was there. I was at Cabela's just before the 2008 recession. So I got hit. I was right before they had implemented the hiring freeze during that process. And so even though they wanted to bring me on full time, they couldn't, simply because, HR and the financial department basically said, no, we're not adding any more roles. We're not spending, there's no salary increases, et cetera. It's all frozen. So that's just the reality there. The other thing there is budgets aren't flexible. Maybe there's some accountants in the room. If there are, I'm sorry. But I've worked with CFOs who will literally say, yeah, we'll give a raise to this individual, but it can't happen until the next quarter or the next fiscal year, right? So you might commit to a raise for somebody in October, but it can't go effect until January. If you work for counties, if you work for, government agencies, budgets are set, a year in advance. So yeah, there might be some minor flexibility. It's not always possible. So that's really key to keep in mind too. If you're publicly traded or you're a small company, owners and shareholders have an expectation of returns. So, while you feel you're underpaid and very well could be underpaid, if you're an owner of a business, you expect to make X dollars for your business. And what I mean by that is, let's say your business is worth, let's just say $1 million. If your business is worth $1 million, you could go sell it tomorrow for $1 million. Most owners want to take a profit of $150,000 to $200,000 a year. If they aren't making 15 to 20% on their investment, the business, they could go sell a business, right? And I've had a lot of MBAs, reshape the conversation like that with me, and it's a good point, and I don't know if anyone's gone through a merger or an acquisition. Those aren't usually fun times. So, it's more complicated than what a lot of people seem, especially early on in your career, and you don't see the things behind the curtain, right? The next point, and this is a little bit more grim, I would say, is sometimes leaders are comped, right? They get bonus structures based on margins and income goals. So if the company's really close to making a goal, and if they feel they can delay your raise by a couple of months so they get a bonus, I've seen that done, and it's probably the first thing on this page that it's the one thing I probably am not okay with, right? It's leaders like anybody else expect to be paid, right? But that's where I expect businesses to have some flexibility. And businesses, especially in a competitive environment, are becoming more flexible. You go back 5-10 years, that wasn't necessarily the case. So keep in mind, whenever you're facing something with compensation, there's a chance that your boss is paid on the same thing that you're trying to have an impact on. So the next thing that, from an employer's perspective, employees are difficult to please. And that might sound weird, but what I mean by that is, there's been a lot of studies where they'll do polls of entire teams and say, hey, if we could do 3 things to make your life better at work, what would they be? And the list is literally endless, right? One person could want, at work daycare, another person could want more PTO, another person could want bonuses, base salary increases, sick leave. It's really hard. Everyone has their unique wants. So it's really hard to say, if I do X, Y, and Z, all of my teams are going to be happy. If you ever want a good author to read sometime, an author, she's actually from Omaha. Her name's Cy Wakeman. She has a handful of books that are really focused in on that. She grew up as a manager in the healthcare space. And I don't know if anyone's involved with healthcare, but healthcare by and large is pretty toxic. There's a vacuum of really good leadership there. And that's her thing was, I can't force my employees to be happy. I can create a space where, they're engaged, they're challenged, they have good teamwork, but I can't force an employee to be happy. So, and money doesn't always buy happiness. And that's, businesses understand that. And the other part, real quick, is something about money is everyone, 50-60% of people feel they're underpaid. That doesn't change as you go on in your career, right? If you make $60,000 and you want to make 70, you go make 70. Now you want 80. Now you want 100. It doesn't go away. So keep that in mind. And even if you are paid fairly, it's you tend to get the feeling over time that, hey, I can make more, and you very well could, but businesses get that. And lastly, you need to understand that nothing's personal, right? Your boss isn't doing a personal attack. Your boss's boss isn't personally attacking you, not giving you a raise. It might feel like that. Being told no sucks. There's no way around it. But it's not personal. It's a business decision. And ultimately, it's a business decision for you as well, right? You're choosing to stay with that employer. You're making a business decision. So while it's not as cut as dry as theirs, in a tight labor market, you have choice. And that's what we're going to talk about. Ultimately, if you're not able to find satisfaction in your current role and you're not able to make headway on what your goals are for comp and benefits, it's time to look elsewhere. Before moving on, anybody have any questions or thoughts on this slide?
I don't have a question, but just a comment of, I think I wasn't expecting to start with the other perspective, but I think that's really good because you can kind of come at it from an emotionless perspective as the employee of like questions like, can you help me understand how raises are evaluated? Is there a certain time of year where it's more appropriate to ask? What can I do to set myself up for this? Like just understanding that there's more to the story. Because like I'm moving into more of that like middle management. So I'm starting to see it now. But like when I was a frontline employee, like I had no idea how all of this works. So you explaining it to us now is like very helpful.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about that from a frontline employees, but even a manager's perspective on, how to have that conversation, when to have that conversation. But it is, especially early on in your career, you don't realize all the gears behind the scenes that go into running a business, and it's complicated to say the least.
Jarrod, do you, from like an employer's perspective, with low unemployment, a really strong jobs market, as far as that, and like companies, obviously, as they continue to feel more and more pressure from what's going on with monetary policy and things like that, and like possible recession on the horizon, as from like a company's perspective or management, does that flip, right? Like right now, it's an employees market as far as they can go anywhere, they have options. 6 months from now, it might be the exact opposite where you have layoffs and hiring freezes. Is that communicated, or should an employee be aware of that? And then perspective from the company, do they see things like that on the horizon, potentially tell them no now?
Yep. So we'll talk more about that on the next slide, actually. But you're absolutely right. Companies are more forward-looking than often employees are. So they see what their forecasted revenue is, their forecasted income is 6, 9, 12 months down the road. If that starts declining, that's when you're going to have hiring freezes, right? That's when you're going to have budget freezes. And that's not necessarily the time you want to go have that conversation. It shouldn't prevent you entirely from having the conversation, but be cognizant that that very well could have an impact. And, with how tight the labor market is right now, I think things would have to get pretty bad. I mean, it'd have to be a pretty prolonged recession to shift that completely the other direction. But there are industries already where it's happening, right? Software, if you follow, the news at all, Facebook, Google, all those companies are laying off sales teams and, freezing hiring in a lot of departments. It's not huge numbers, but it is happening to a degree where go back 12, 18 months and, you're getting $50,000 signing bonuses, multi 6-figure stock options and stuff. And now those positions are gone. So it can turn pretty quickly, especially if your company has, the ups and downs that can often happen.
I just always thought like, when you hear like the Federal Reserve talk about, oh, we're gonna put pressure on wages. We want to suppress wages. They're out of hand. And like companies think like, oh my gosh, well, that's tools for us, you're gonna ask for a raise, do it now or something. But yeah, that makes sense. That's good.
Anything else? Perfect. Well, let's shift the conversation to how do we have it with our current employer. And I first want everyone to ask themselves this question: what's most important to you when you think of compensation, when you think of work-life balance, benefits? What's most important to you? And if you want to share, by all means. Obviously, I just went through a job search, so I can share what my thought process was when making that move. Obviously, I was with 5.9s almost a decade. But ultimately, I wanted work-life balance, right? It wasn't about money. It wasn't about benefits. It was simply be home more, which is ironic as I sit here in Kansas City. But my new employer has 4 months of paternity leave, right? Like those types of things are really, really important, and they're unique. So if anybody else wants to share it, by all means, we feel free. But we can go to the next slide if no one else wants to share.
Yeah, work-life balance. I was self-employed before this, so it was more like you can never shut your brain off. But now I have a job where, and the day I'm done, I'm done.
Yeah, that's
And
great.
what we have here at the chamber is flexible scheduling, so we can really come in whenever we feel we want to. And if we feel like we got our work done, then we can leave. And so that's really nice when you have appointments and when you have our staff that have kids to pick them up. And it's just really nice to be able to take care of life too when you have to step up from work for that moment. That's, for me, an important piece.
I think it was awesome, like for me, as like an employee and even with employees, I noticed when we started doing things, implementing things like, hey, once a quarter on a Thursday, we're gonna go bowling half the day, or we're gonna go to the lake, or hey, on Fridays, why don't we just all leave at 3 o'clock? And started doing things like that, or getting first Monday of every month, we started bringing them coffee and stuff. And not just like with their demeanor and like attitude towards everything going on, but I also know like my attitude. So like, I just think even like what's important is just like having that camaraderie and like that kind of like balance of like, yeah, we're coworkers and stuff, but like where you can also like relax and do nice things for each other and kind of be in a good work environment. I think that's for me, like, I just want to be in a good work environment.
Yeah.
Your name's on
Absolutely.
the door, so you just.
There is no work-life balance for me.
Okay, like explain.
I wish, I think about it, but no, it's hard. And when you own your own business, it's hard to turn off a lot, but it's good knowing what makes everybody else happy, because
You can have that.
I can offer that
You
to
can
other
be a good
people.
employer.
I can make other
Yeah.
people's lives happy, you know.
Just not your.
Yeah, just not right now or me. Later.
Yeah, yeah.
I can relate to that. So, I mean, that's a good example that I mean, 4 or 5 people all had unique things they're looking for, right? And none of it was money. So it's really important that there's so many more things that you can negotiate on than simply dollars. So we'll talk more about that, but that's a really good example that, you know, there's a lot of other things, especially younger generations consider that make our lives better. And hey, I'm willing to take less money if it means I have a better work-life balance or something. So, you know, when you're preparing to have the conversation with your employer, the first thing I expect people to do, and this is something I mentored a lot of my employees on, is what's most important to you. And this is something a lot of my mentors have also basically shaped the same thing. You know, I've had previous companies where I've basically built my own comp structure and stuff like that. And it's simply, hey, we have an idea of where we want to pay you, but you can make it basically structured how you want. So what's most important? Do you want more time off, etc.? That all matters. I'm sorry if you guys can see Microsoft Outlook updating, but so yeah, like we said, there's a lot of options here: benefits, work-life balance, bonuses, comp, etc. There's a lot of options. So and it doesn't have to be one of those things. It could be a combination of those. And I'll give some examples here shortly on what I've done in my career that aren't necessarily straight dollars, but they have value, and it's what was important to me, at the time. So to Paul's question about timing is very important, right? You don't want to sound tone deaf to the situation that your company's in, right? If you have annual reviews, a lot of people will bring up this conversation in an annual review. I don't recommend doing that, right? Have this conversation 3, 4, 5 months before then. A lot of organizations basically have raise pools. We're going to give 3 or 4% raises across the board. Managers go determine if that means that person gets 1% or if that person gets, 6%. But you only have a total raise pool of 3 or 4%. Almost every company I've ever worked for has done that. It's very common. But what that means is by the time you're having that conversation with your manager, the decision's already made, right? You're getting 3%, 4%, 5%, and maybe you wanted 15%. At that point in the game, it can be really hard to get those extra dollars. So lay the groundwork well ahead of time, because they're going to have to go have several conversations behind the scenes to make it happen in most cases. If you just had a big project win, if you just had tight timelines, deadlines, etc., have the conversation then, right? Come prepared with the positive feedback that your boss is, giving you, your team's giving you, and go have a conversation about what does my career look like? What's my next step? Hey, I want to make X dollars. How do we get there? But use these types of wins as a launch pad for that conversation, because you're showing that you can perform, and ultimately you can make your boss's life easier, and that's really important. As a manager, the one thing I always liked is when people, when my employees did what they could to make my life easier. Wonderful, because I'm busy enough the way it is. I don't need people who can just keep dumping things on my plate. I want them taken off my plate, and people who step up and do that, worth every penny they want. The next part is understand how your business is doing financially. So if you work for the Buckle, they're publicly traded. You can look at how the stock is doing. You can look at how their income's doing. That's easier to find. If you work for a small business who's private, understanding how the business is doing can be a little bit more difficult. But if you have record sales, you can feel better about having these conversations. If you are starting to have budget cuts or hiring freezes or layoffs, timing isn't going to sound good. So like I said earlier, it shouldn't completely stop the conversation. But I would be hesitant, and I would definitely prepare myself to be told no in that case. So you don't want to come off as tone deaf. From a manager's perspective, no one wants to do a hiring freeze. No one wants to do budget cuts or layoffs. And if if you feel you're underpaid in that case and you start seeing these things going around you, you know, there's no harm in preserving yourself and looking at what other options there are, right? You always have to have a backup plan, and you know, sometimes it makes sense to explore those avenues. Come prepared, right? Market research on what you think your salary should be. You know, there's plenty of websites out there. Glassdoor will have good reviews. You know, I think LinkedIn even has salary postings. There's so many options. One of my favorites is actually using Colorado's salary data. So Colorado put in the law, I think last year, where every job posting for the state of Colorado has to have a salary range on it. Obviously, it costs more to live in Denver than it does Kearney. But at least in technology, the salary differences are only 15-20%. They're not crazy compared to cost of living differences. So I use that data that has to be, you know, published by law, and then use that to prepare for my conversations, you know, with my leaders. And it's a really good approach, right? Obviously, you can have recruiters who reach out who give, you know, salary ranges. We'll talk more about that shortly, but try to get as much data as you can here. It's not easy, but you know, there are a lot better sources out there than were, you know, few years ago, even 5-10 years ago. You need to be honest with your skill sets and your experience, right? People tend to feel they are the best at what they do no matter what. And hopefully that's the case. But sometimes, you know, the average employee is average, right? It's just the reality. So be honest with yourself. You know, if you don't have the certs that are common with your industry, if you don't have the experience, just be honest, and that's okay, right? Especially in a tight labor market, you still might get the salary you're looking for. Just be honest. No harm in that. And you know, consider talking to peers, right? You know, you probably are all well aware, you know, it's not illegal to talk to coworkers about salaries. I tend not to do it, right? But you know, if you have a peer who's at another company, feel free to have that conversation. You know, everyone on the level playing field, ultimately beneficial for everyone. So feel free to have that conversation. You know, obviously talking about salary is kind of taboo, but you got to be comfortable with it, right? There's a lot of upside, and keep in mind, especially with salary, if you get a raise now, that's going to impact your career earnings 30 years from now. So it is very advantageous to get, you know, to move your way up the salary range as quickly as possible, because that will have a massive lifetime, you know, impact. So that's how you prepare for a meeting, right? So how do you approach the conversation? So like I said, schedule a meeting with your manager, you know, state that you want to, you want to discuss what your future looks like, what, you know, potential opportunities, something along those lines, right? Yeah, I probably wouldn't be upfront and say, hey, I want to talk about, you know, I want to talk about a raise. I would simply say, hey, I want to talk about what my future looks like. Your boss is going to get it, right? What you don't want to do is just put a calendar invite on their calendar and just show up and blindside them. If you tell them you want to talk about your future, they're going to get it. If you just throw a calendar invite on their calendar with no subject, they're going to assume you're quitting. I'm a manager. I felt it, and I've talked to a lot of other leaders who feel the same thing. So just put on there what the meeting's about, because we'll all assume the worst. We don't want to, but that's just what human nature is, right? So you've got the meeting, you know, come prepared to talk yourself up, right? Much like a job interview, you are selling yourself on why you're worth what you're asking for, what's important to you, whether that's salary, whether that's bonuses, whether that's benefits, work-life balance, etc. Come prepared to sell why you're worth that, and why you're going to continue being worth that, right? Because obviously there's a give and take to anything, right? When the more you're being paid by the company, understandably, the more, you know, your responsibility you're going to take on, the more work you're going to take on, and that's okay. that should correlate pretty well to what how you're compensated. So be willing and prepared to say, hey, I'm willing to take on X, Y, and Z. I'm willing to take on that role. I'm confident I can take on that role, but I feel I want to get to this number in doing so. Show commitment to the company, right? Obviously leaders know that, hey, if somebody comes to me saying, hey, I want to move up in the company, I want these opportunities, and they tell you no, they understand that you're going to start looking elsewhere. So tell them, hey, I want to stay in the company, but I also want to look for these challenges or look for these opportunities. They're going to appreciate that, right? They want to know that, hey, if I make this investment in this employee now, this is going to pay off for me for 5, 10, 20 years to come. And that's really important. So, show that commitment. Don't give ultimatums. There's a no-win situation in that case, unless you're ready to walk. So, once you've had the conversation, right, start the conversation with what your goals are, how they align, then shift to compensation or whatever you're asking for. So, like I said, it doesn't have to be compensation. One year during a review at one of my previous employers, I had just gotten promoted, 3 months before my annual review. And so in that employer, if you had been promoted within 6 months of the year end, you didn't get a, annual raise, if you will. So instead of an annual raise, which I wouldn't get, because I was just recently promoted, I asked for an extra week of vacation. There's no cost to the employer. There's the cost to me, right? Or there's a benefit to me of my hourly rate times 40 hours, but it also means a better work-life balance. So, and that meant I also, get a year every single year going forward, or a week every single year going forward. And ultimately that's what was most important to me at that time. So PTO, whether it's your current company or a potential company, is always something I encourage people to negotiate on, because it doesn't have a real cost to the employer. Some places have pretty strict PTO policies, but in my case, most of them are willing to bend if somebody's explicitly negotiating on that.
Question, Jarrod.
Yeah.
How does that work when your company offers unlimited PTO?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Obviously, unlimited PTOs are a bit different, right? You can't, you're not going to really be able to negotiate on that. I would focus on other benefits, right? Whether that's stipends for cell phone, internet, wellness benefits. So like, $100 a month for a gym membership or something. A lot of places already include all of those, but I would focus on the other, other benefits that are important to you. Some places will do like vacation bonuses. So once a year you get $500 to go take a vacation, or more, or things along those lines. There's a lot of options there. It's a good question though, because a lot of places are going, unlimited PTO, a lot of reasons behind it. The major one, which is they don't have to count it on their financials. So it's a benefit for the company, but if you're able to actually take PTO, it's a good benefit as an employee as well.
They don't have to pay it out when you leave the company
Yeah,
either.
correct. So so basically it's a liability for the company, right? They have to basically count that on their books as being deferred income. There's only 2 states in America that it's deferred income, Nebraska and California. So technically any other state, you don't have to pay it out. Most places do, but Nebraska, California, you do. So that's the reason why is they, you think about, let's say 4 weeks a year per person, that's what, 15, it's like 15%, 10% of your salary right there. It's not a small amount of money. As I said earlier, I don't encourage ultimatums. If I always encourage, if you're going to have the conversation, right? If you're going to muster up the courage to have this conversation, because it's not easy, but if you're going to muster up the conversation, the courage to have this conversation, negotiate in earnest, right? be actually willing to stay with the company. Because if you do all this negotiation and then leave a month later, it's gonna put a really bad taste in their mouth, right? And you know, you never know when you're gonna cross paths in the future. So if you're gonna negotiate, do it, you know, honestly and be open and just simply have the conversation. An ultimatum is not likely to go well. You know, there are hundreds or thousands of examples of people just getting walked out the door when that happens. So if you're prepared for that, okay, go shoot your shot. But if that's the case, if you're going to be willing to give an ultimatum, you're likely upset more than just money, frankly. Big key here, don't expect an immediate decision. And you know, this should go without saying, but you tell your boss likely has to go tell HR or their boss or the CFO who has to handle the budgets. It's a complicated process. So, you know, usually I say, hey, you know, give it 2 to 4 weeks, follow up. If you don't have an answer in a month, you know, you could start weighing your options there. You could go to HR, you can go to your boss's boss. I would probably recommend going to HR first. Some people will take it very personally that you went above their head to their boss. Sometimes it's the only way to get stuff done, but just know that if you have a really close relationship with their boss, perfect, feel free to do it. If you don't, and you simply go out of your way to go have that conversation, you know, there's a little bit of risk there, and you could upset your manager. So just be
Dude, I just had a client get fired for that. She went over the manager's head to the HR to ask for more time off and fired.
Oh my God.
wow.
It was wild.
It's surprising. I mean, I would say that's probably the exception, right? That shouldn't happen. I'm surprised HR let it happen, frankly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not a great look for anybody, frankly.
Manager must have been on a power trip.
I think he was.
That's crazy. So when you're talking about salary ranges, you know, give a range, right? Hey, I'm making 50 now. I want to get to 65 to 70 within 12 to 18 months. You know, understand that if you give a range, the employer is going to likely go in the lower end of that range. It's just how it works. So feel free to pad that range $5,000-$10,000, right? You know, you want to be comfortable. You want to be happy with where your compensation is. So give a range, say, hey, let's make a plan to get there. I understand this may not all happen overnight, but you know, 12 months from now, I want to be making 70,000 a year. Okay, well, that should allow you to have the conversation with your manager to say, I'm going to get these certs, I'm going to do this, I'm going to take on this responsibility to make it happen, right? Another option besides just base pay is bonuses or commissions if you're in sales. And employers really like bonuses and commissions because they only cost the company money if the company's doing well. So it's a lot easier to you know, keep salaries under control in down years when it's tied to performance or tied to sales. As you continue moving up in your career, your base salary will start, you know, leveling off, but your variable commission or your variable salary will start increasing at that point. A lot of organizations, you know, target a 70-30 split. That's what I'm on. So 70% of my salary is base pay, 30% of my salary is commission. And then that's approximately what I was at Five Nines as well. So as you get into upper level management, as you get into really, you know, even outside sales, that might be a 50-50 or 60-40. But that becomes more and more common. If you do take commissions and you do take a lower base pay, your upside, right? Your commission structure should be more aggressive to allow you to get higher earnings with sales. So if your on target earnings, your OTE, so if this is what you hit, your compensation at goal is 100,000 and you have a $50,000 base salary, you're at a 50-50 split, right? if your base salary was 35,000 and your OTs, your OT should be 110, 115, because you're taking more risk on by having a lower base salary. You should have more upside potential, if you hit your goal. So I don't know if anyone's been involved in sales or commission structures at all. If you ever want one-on-one input on how to have those conversations, by all means, reach out. I've been on both sides, the manager side and the employee side there. So commission structures get pretty complex. Bonuses, you can tie bonuses to almost anything, right? Most upper level managers will have bonuses tied to margin goals or tied to net income goals. And like I said, those will only pay out if you hit those metrics. What's that? Sorry. Must have just been feedback. I talked a lot about other benefits, right? So PTO, conferences, trainings, stipends, company cars. There's a lot of things on the table. It's not like the entire company is going to have company cars, but how many Kidwell trucks do you see out and about? Company cars are probably more common than what a lot of people realize. So, not every company is going to be flexible in this, and some companies want to try to keep benefits the same for everybody. But if you're a key contributor and you're already making a salary you're happy with, there's no harm in asking for these other items. I worked with a coworker in the past who, as part of his employment agreement, he was guaranteed a conference every single year, or a couple conferences every year, and travel, et cetera, for those conferences. That's $7,500, $8,000 a year for those two conferences. So there could be a lot of value and a lot of things like that. They're really positive there. Already talked about this. More compensation, more responsibilities. It's just second nature, human nature, but it's the reality. Already talked about giving adequate time. Most critical piece about this is be confident, right? Be confident in what you're worth, be confident in what you want, and approach your leader confidently. That goes a long way. This is an uncomfortable conversation, but when done confidently, you can be really successful, frankly. Couple last points. Use caution if you're trying to get a counteroffer. A lot of people, especially in hiring, will tell you, if you accept a counteroffer, you're like 80% likely to leave the job within 6 months. And that's true. But that's true when you're looking to leave for other things besides money. For most people, it's not just about money, right? It's work-life balance. It's you don't like your manager, or you don't like your work environment. It's not just money. When it is just money, though, right? When you're happy with the rest of your role, the rest of the people you work with, and it's just about dollars and cents, counteroffers can work. I've been a part of a number of them in the past, and they work. Those employees have been at those places 5-10 years after the fact. So I'm not as opposed to them as other people, but just be cautious with it, right? Don't expect a counteroffer. But as I said at the get-go, hiring people is difficult. So sometimes it makes sense to pay the dollars. Any quick questions before I jump into the potential employer conversation?
Real quick here, Jarrod, if you're talking about the commission versus base pay and things like that.
Yep.
Do you have any advice for someone who was, let's say they're wanting to go to more commissions, and hey, you're gonna be 50% commissions, 50% base pay for helping service like maybe current stuff that we have, and do you advise anything like, well, then how am I gonna be spending my time, or should the pay direct how you spend your time, or should you look at that as far as?
So you need to pay based on what you want for a company goal, right? For most sales roles, that means going out and generating more revenue. So you're going to pay more commissions to go bring in new revenue rather than revenue that's already in the door, right? So in a typical sales world where you have outside sales and inside sales is paid typically much less than outside sales who's out there hunting for new dollars. Inside sales, they could be farming current relationships. But in every company I've seen, outside sales is paid far more. But when it comes to salary, obviously you need to have a good pulse on what you feel this person should be paid. That should be their OTE. From there, you just simply you negotiate on what base pay is to variable comp to commission, and then you pay your commission based on what you want the business outcome to be, whether that's keep customers happy and generate revenue with existing customers, or if that's go out, hunt new business and bring in new business. That makes sense?
Yeah,
Yeah, commissions it's a whole other big conversation, and everyone wants to treat it differently. Everyone, I've worked with people who want really high base pay and really high commissions. That doesn't usually go hand in hand. So you got to be realistic about those two. So let's talk about potential employers, right? I'm guessing most people here have had recruiters reach out to them. It especially in this day and age is pretty common. So, once again, it's just much like your current employer. What's most important? What's the market comp? I usually, when I have recruiters reach out to me, I usually early on, politely ask for what salary and benefits look like. If I'm making $100,000 and somebody reaches out for a position paying 50, I don't want to go through that process. We're going to waste everyone's time. So within the first few messages on LinkedIn, I'm vetting for both of us whether we're aligned there. Doesn't mean that one side or the other might change their minds throughout the process, but try to get that out on the table. If people are hesitant to give numbers, it's a bit of a red flag. Like I said, as long as you're doing it politely, there's no harm in having that conversation, and just want to make sure everyone's aligned. When you go through the process, make sure everything's in writing. It might sound silly, but get it in writing. And that includes all benefits, how bonuses are structured, how commissions are structured. You want to get all that information out so you can vet the offer, right? You want to make sure that aligns with what you're looking for. And that could include things like paternity leave, maternity leave, PTO, all those things. Make sure it's all laid out there. So most companies will give a verbal offer before writing a formal offer. So, when you're talking with the verbal offer, you're on the phone, you express your excitement. Hey, I'm looking forward to joining the team. I think I can do a great job. You've got great people. I'm looking forward to it. Send over the offer. I'll review it. Give me 3 to 5 days and, I'll get back with you. That way you're not committing to it immediately. You're leaving the door open to negotiate, right? And especially with potential employers, I always recommend negotiating. Look, they've chosen you as the one they want to go with. They don't want to start the whole process over again. So if that means they have to pay 5 or 10% more money, they're going to likely do it. And that's just the reality. It takes a lot of time to hire people. They're going to spend the money. They're going to get you on board. When reviewing written offers, like I said earlier, look at all the benefits, right? Stock options, 401ks, healthcare. A lot of the other fringe benefits can be thousands of dollars a year. So those things are important, right? So make sure you're accurately comparing those to your current position or any other offers you have. Just because offer A pays $5,000 more doesn't mean that total comp on option B isn't, let's say $10,000 more, because healthcare is better. You get a cell phone stipend, etc. So, like I said earlier, a big draw for my position was paternity leave, and I got it at 5 nines, but 4 months is pretty rare. So that's a big thing in my world. So those types of things make a big difference. So make sure you're just considering all those aspects. If you are expecting multiple offers, don't be afraid to inform your recruiters that, right? Hey, really enjoyed the process, but I'm expecting an offer, Thursday. When can I expect an offer, if one were to happen here? And if you're the choice, they're gonna basically skip the line to get your offer as quick as possible, right? A lot of companies are going through the process, and by the time they're making an offer, somebody already has a job. So, this will speed up the process, and this will likely make the offer stronger. So it could mean, hey, you got $10,000 more because they don't want to lose you. So, politely inform them that, hey, I've got multiple offers. I'm going to weigh all those. And it's a good way to, make sure they're aware, you're going to be top dollar when you come on board. When you are ready to negotiate, schedule a call. You can do this over email, but then schedule a call, highlight what you want to negotiate on, whether that's PTO, it could be start date, it could be signing bonuses. In today's day and age, I recommend negotiating on a couple things. Like I said, PTO earlier. If it's open PTO, unlimited PTO, obviously not a negotiation point. So if that's that, okay. If you do have a PTO, let's say 3 weeks, 4 weeks, ask for another week if you feel that's appropriate. Most organizations will be on board there because it doesn't cost them anything. But where I recommend negotiating is salary, right? Maybe it's maybe it's $10,000 more. As long as you're reasonable with your ask, there's a really high likelihood that maybe they come back with a counter, but you're likely to get a good offer out of that. And the other part about that is signing bonuses. Signing bonuses are pretty common. They can range in size from 500 or $1,000 to 50 to 100,000 in certain roles. But it's something to ask about, right? It's more advantageous for the business to pay you $10,000 upfront right now than pay you $10,000 a year forever. So they're going to be more willing to give those dollars upfront because it's a one-time expense rather than an annual expense. So that's how they're going to look at it. So ask for it. Don't be afraid to ask for a $5,000 signing bonus or something along those lines. It's very common, especially in healthcare, especially in technology, where there's a lot of demand for those employees. And like I said, the company doesn't want to start over. I mean, first off, they may not have had a lot of applicants in the first place. So there's a chance that you may have been the only person or one of maybe 2 or 3, but they've chosen you. So they don't want to start over. They want to, everyone is compensated. Everyone is mutually beneficial to come to a deal. So keep that in mind. That's why you can be really confident when you approach these conversations. And ultimately have some flexibility, right? As long as you're reasonable, you'll come to terms. And maybe it's not, maybe it's 57,000 instead of 60, but you get a $5,000 bonus, which is important. Rarely are you going to get an offer that's the perfect one you've been waiting for. It can happen, but have some flexibility and you'll end up pretty happy and in good shape. Anybody have any questions, thoughts, etc.?
We'll do questions, but Jared, maybe you want to pause the recording part and we'll just do
Sure.
questions. Just in case someone wants to file their own.